nothing I can do.
First started, we really weren't, but I mean, you know, we were what we thought was hardcore. Then we kind of progressed into like melodic hardcore, but that was before we broke up.
Oh yeah.
I mean, did you have anything specific you wanted to know, like as far as just like how the shows kind of got started, or anything?
Yeah, pretty much, because I didn't start going to shows till I was like 15 or whatever, and that's whenever like By Blood and them had already started. And
I didn't start going to shows until much later. Well, I caught the tail end of By Blood's run. Like they were still around whenever I started going to shows, but I didn't see much of them. Honestly, like I just kind of get started into the scene just wanting to play music through bands like Green Day and Fall Out Boy back whenever I was like 13 and still in 8th grade. So I had no clue of what hardcore really was until I watched By Blood and I saw bands like that. I saw Blood Soaked Memories and Eva Shadows. Book of Trees was another inspiration. I guess for a lot of us, it kind of just came from. It just kind of came. I'm trying not to sound too generic here, too stereotypical here. It just kind of came from if you had a friend who had a guitar or a rig or anything. You just kind of, the way we did it was we always just get these ragtag groups of people. You know, right. It was just like you had a friend be like, this guy knows how to play drums. Let's see if he wants to do this. And it generally didn't work out all that well, but. You know, it was just any jam band you could get together and put on shows, you know. And then First and Cedar came along.
Oh yeah.
I guess, and I'm probably rambling on and just talking, you know, nonsense. I think my first biggest experience to maybe really want to play shows and get together something was watching Book of Trees' first show up in Hardy's Chapel. It was my cousin's band, and they were like the first. They were one of the very few, you know, this whole scene kind of started with bands like Sadville and 9 Ball, was it? Some pop-up band, and Eva Shadows. and bands like that. But watching Book of Trees, I was like, if those guys can get together, a little ragtag group of guys, just, you know, 4 dudes that really didn't have much in common, but they still all wanted to play music. That was their big driving goal. They made friends through that. I was like, if they can do that, I can do that. So I just kind of started playing in crappy bands, you know, my first few times. And then, you know, This Means War got together, and that was kind of, I feel like that was the big insurgence of the scene. That was like whenever everything was really happening. We had 2 venues going really strong.
So who was the first band you were in? Like,
that's embarrassing. I think technically the first band I was ever in, I had this little jam thing going on with Chris Goss, who was my friend and drummer at the time, and my cousin Ross Faulkner, who was my bass player. And we were just trying to be like the Fall of Troy. That's all we were trying to do. We were trying to be technical. I was playing guitar and singing. It never really worked out. But my first like legit band that started playing shows was a crappy little metal band called Beyond the Chaos.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was really bad, and I'm not gonna go through all the members of it. But my friend Sebastian Brown, he joined the band, and I think that was when time I was like, we need to get our stuff straight and like form a legit band. And so we tried to make that band really good. Then we broke up. Then I was a part of nothing for a long time. But that was still before the scene had really picked up. Mm-hmm. That was back whenever Eva Shadows and Book of Trees were still kind of dominating. But I think they were all still on like their last breaths, or you know, that was their last final gasp of air. And I think that you can chart the scene. You can chart the progression of the scene through the Battle of the Bands events that Cookeville High School had, really. Because you could tell, like, that band didn't play that one, so they weren't around anymore. You could chart the progression of the scene, because different bands were coming on, were kind of jumping on board around those times, so.
So, what pretty much made you want to do is like a screamo bass band instead of doing more of a melodic metal or hardcore?
What I'm doing right now?
Yeah, with
Finda Brita?
Yeah.
Well, that kind of just came about as, like, I'd finished up doing Kayak Weather. I hadn't done Kayak Weather for a long time. After This Means War broke up, I just wanted to do something that was pop punk, you know. But that never really came about because no one else around here really wanted to do that. So I was just kind of floating in limbo, doing whatever I could do to pass the time.
You know, pop punk is shit. I can't even talk, dude. Pop punk's a kicking thing, right?
It is, but not around at the time around here. It wasn't.
Oh, yeah.
But that was like what I was wanting to do was okay. See, the different thing is. Yes, it is kicking, but I wanted to do a different kind of pop punk. I didn't want to do the thing where people were like, I want to play like 4 Year Strong music. I want to play Chugs. No offense to the guys in Forever in His Glory. Love those dudes. But like that wasn't the kind of music I wanted to play. I wanted to play stuff that was really fast, title fight-ish. No one wanted to do that. Everyone wanted to kind of, I don't know. I could find no drummers. That was the biggest problem. I could never find a drummer. Once my schedule freed up, I was like, okay, I can do anything, but no one was around. So I got in contact with these guys after certain issues that happened with their bass player, which I'm not gonna reveal that right now. But they were like, hey, do you want to come by? And I've been friends with the other 2 guys from Finda Brita, Matt and Parker, for a long time. Knew them all through high school, and they're like, you should totally come and play bass for us and scream. And first practice, we kind of just knew that was it. Like,
yeah, he was talking about how you kind of just broke the bass on first practice or something, some shit like that.
Oh yeah,
That one show.
Yeah, to be fair, they made it out like that was. I broke it like completely the first time. Actually, it had already been broken once.
Oh yeah.
And I just kind of finished it off. It wasn't glued that well, so I just kind of finished it. But it was the best experience ever. It was the first time I ever felt like, you know, when you practice with a band the first few times, you're like, yeah, maybe this good. No. First time we ever practiced, I was like, I know. This is great. Like, this is gold. Like, I'd never done anything like this before. If you asked me, like, a year ago if I was going to be, like, screaming for an old-school styled screamo band, I told you you're lying. Because all I wanted to do was melodic hardcore and pop punk.
You fucking liars.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I guess the kind of thing I wanted to do, because I'm such a huge, like, Glassjaw fan. I love, like, old post-hardcore, like Thursday and Glassjaw at the Drive-In, whatnot. I wanted to do something that was kind of reminiscent of that, but still kind of tinged with like stuff like Touche Amore and just a lot of influences like that. I wanted to bring kind of a hardcore sense to this kind of slow burn screamo that they were doing. Right. And not that I'm saying I improved their sound in any way. They already had a really good sound before I came along. But that's just kind of how that came about.
So how many shows have y'all played since y'all came together?
3. it's we all those guys work really busy hours. You know, in the process of me looking for a job, I'm always free to do more stuff, but they have very rigorous jobs at Chili's and O'Charlie's and whatnot. So I'm, you know, we get to play whenever we can. We were supposed to play with Caravels at a Nashville show, the 30th, I think, but it got canceled.
Yeah, I saw about that. That kind of sucked.
I was so bummed. I was so excited. I've never played Nashville before. That's the only thing is, you know, you think the guy, you know, you think he's played in so many bands. How has he never played in Nashville? The things never came about, but I was so excited for it.
Yeah, I was kind of looking forward to that one because I know I missed y'all first show, and I was thinking I'll actually be able to make it to this one. But
that show went over a whole lot better than I anticipated. I was so nervous that first show was going to suck so much. Like, I remember, because I was like, these bands are all like hardcore, like full blown. Like, one of them was a metalcore band, the other one was like the Chariot-ish kind of band, and you had Oracles, which is like pretty much metalcore. And I was like, we're not going to fit in here at all. There's just, you know, but one thing I've always appreciated about this scene, and I think a lot of people could vouch for this, and maybe it's because it's involuntary, because because a lot of people want to do different things, is I've always appreciated that no matter what kind of band it is, usually if you're in a band, you're in.
Yeah.
You're pretty much widely accepted because you're at least playing music, and around here, if you're playing music, that goes a long way. At least if you took the time to form a band, if you took the time to form a band around here, you pretty much. You're accepted, even if your band kind of sucks. And I'm not gonna talk about that kind of thing. But so you wouldn't. It wasn't completely out of the question to see like a pop punk band from out of town play with like a metalcore band, because that's all we had. You couldn't be picky about these guys aren't this type of genre, so they can't play this show. That's never how it's been. I love that about Caleb. I love that about Wade. I love that about Jungle Cat. It didn't matter what you were, as long as you were in the same realm of. I guess if you were, as long as you weren't like an acoustic act, and even then sometimes you had that. So very, very, you weren't really, you know, if you had a band, you were able to play.
Yeah.
You were given every opportunity.
So what venues are there around here in Cookeville? Because I know in Crossville it's pretty much either a house show or the rare house show or the complex. So is there anything around here?
Crossville actually has more venues than we do now, because like we had First and Cedar. That's been long shut down for now, but that was my favorite venue. Then we had Amps and Ramps / the Fallout / whatever else it's been called, and that lasted a long time. But the problem there was it shut down. But we do, I think every now and then we're playing lobby shows there, but I don't think it's. We played our second show at the lobby, which has always been my favorite place to play. But since then we haven't done anything with it, so I don't think there are really any venues other than if you can find a house to play. There really aren't that many venues around here to do, unless it's like a bar, and who's gonna go to a bar to watch a metalcore band? We haven't played a house show here yet, but I'd like to. Yeah, I know it's really weird having to come up with questions and stuff.
No, this is the first time I've done this, so I'm kind of like,
believe me, I'm just as nervous.
I'm pulling it out of my ass pretty much.
I'm just looking around like I don't want to look straight at the camera, because I want to look like, you know, if I look straight at the camera the whole time, it'd be like,
it's the vortex to another
it's
place.
The vortex. Yes, exactly. I will say this. I will say that, you know, when you're younger, I noticed that a lot of people went through this phase. I'm not naming names because all of us did at some point. But I noticed that around the time, it always kind of amazes me the phases that Cookeville went through. Because back whenever I was in high school, it was like everyone wanted to play music like A Day to Remember. Everyone wanted to play this stuff that was like, but they didn't like. They wanted to play music like A Day to Remember did, but they didn't understand that it involved more than just breakdowns. So you had so many bands coming out that had so many breakdowns and very little other stuff in them. And heck, that was what my first band was. I was, I was a victim of it too. But everyone wanted to play music like Attack Attack. This is before we really discovered what hardcore is. But and then around the time hardcore started getting popular, and people wanted to start doing things like 100th, and all of a sudden it became really fun to hate on bands like Asking Alexander. And then immediately, if you liked anything like Attack Attack or Asking Alexander, you were automatically Scene Kid.
Exactly.
Like, that always made me, that always made me and I did it too. Everyone went through this because if you were a hardcore kid, you automatically hated scene kids, and you were obviously discriminatory. I was like that too at one point. I'm not gonna, but I mean, you kind of grow out of that mindset. You think just like whatever you like, but I just like it's kind of funny that you can kind of chart how people have gone through phases as far as their music goes from the bands that have been in Cookeville, because you had so many bands that came out that thought they were so heavy. Our first band, we thought we were so heavy. But I mean, again, I'm not being discriminatory. I'm just pleased that we've had so many people who were so enthusiastic about playing music. You can never hardly say that any bands around here like started a band just to be cool, or like, at least it was people who just wanted to get together and play music. And I was always, that's one thing I'm always been proud of with Cookeville and Crossville.
Cookeville a little bit more than Crossville, but
Crossville, honestly, I've learned in the recent years that before Cookeville really had a scene. I mean, I don't count the MySpace, because the MySpace was just kind of, I didn't really experience the MySpace, but there wasn't, as far as I knew as a music lover, there wasn't much of a scene before, Diva Shadows started doing stuff. But as far as, I think Crossville was actually quite ahead of the curve. They were actually quite ahead of us in terms of bands playing. They had like these hardcore bands. They really had stuff that was, they had the good stuff, but we didn't really know anything about that unless you were like a scene goer down here. So Crossville was really kind of ahead of us in terms of that. It was only until like I was a sophomore that we really kind of started picking up on, we should start playing shows more,
Yeah.
You started meeting like-minded people in high school, because in middle school no one cared about playing music except for like 2 or 3 people. Then in high school, that's when it hit. But yeah, Crossville had crazy shows. They had Blood Soaked, they had By Blood. They were hip and happening. You've been living in Crossville all your life, right?
Since I was 8, so for 13 years.
Where'd you move from there? Where'd you move from?
I was in South Carolina before that.
Oh,
so.
yeah. Oh, South Carolina's pretty nice. That's a pretty good place to. I know they've got a lot of. They got a big scene over there.
Yeah.
I'm just talking out of my ass at this point. I think it was always really cool. When I first started playing music, I was really kind of nervous that like no one else is going to want to do this. I'm going to be the only guy around here that's going to want to, get together any sort of band. And it was true at first. No one really wanted to do anything. But it really pleased me that once it started kicking in for people, I was like, yeah, like-minded people.
You won't bust your face. different bands have you been in?
I've been in several. I started out in a band called Intentions Darken, which turned into By Blood We Were Bonded. But before that was My Last Defiance, which was a band in Cookville. I played for Hero Remains and, of course, Bury Your Teeth. There's a couple other small side projects I was a part of.
Cool. So it's Bury Your Teeth, the plan for it in the near future?
Well, we're taking some time off right now to write some new stuff, and we're working on some new jams right now.
Cool.
And hopefully here in a couple months we'll start putting stuff together and maybe record a new album. We're talking about putting out a split vinyl with Indebrita.
So when do y'all think you're going to do that?
It's up in the air. That's up to Caleb.
Oh yeah. So besides taking time off to Bury Your Teeth, what are you up to right now?
Just working all the time and doing some things with Wave Lab and with my new move. I'm talking about maybe making Wave Lab portable, where I can go to a band's practice space and actually record them there.
So any bands actually plan on doing that?
Huh?
Any bands planning on doing that anytime soon?
I don't have any bands lined up to record right now. There's a couple potentials, but I don't know.
Cool. So what do you see the local Crossville hardcore scene? Where do you see that going right now, and how has it changed since it started?
Well, the hardcore scene when it first started in Crossville was pretty big. I mean, sometimes you get 350 people come out and shows. Now it's kind of dwindled a little bit down to, maybe 30 to 50 people max.
Yeah.
But there's potential for it to grow again. It's just a new audience, People don't realize what hardcore is, I suppose. And we kind of lost touch with the kids in school and stuff, so there's not much exposure to them. So shows have been kind of down lately.
Right.
But it'll build up again eventually.
Cool. So how has in addition to that, how has the audience changed too? I mean, there seems to be a lot more younger kids in it than, well, I don't know, I know whenever I started, it was my first show was a By Blood show, and there was most of the ages ranged from 15 to I think around 30 or something. But now it seems like most, unless it's an older band, most of the people that show up are younger kids. There's a
lot of faces I don't recognize in shows. But
are there any older Crossville bands that are still kicking around that besides you and Caleb and?
Yeah, Oracles is still around. They're reforming, but Oracles is still around.
coming out. Give it up for Bear team.
Shut up! What? Shut up! What?
Pick up on their bottles. I'm looking for the spin that track. Orthodox. Bill Benson National.
Top as we go, high as we go.
Shout out to Mr. Mike.
Mr. Mike! Mr. Mike! Mr. Mike!
That's our chaperone.
Educational field trip!
Field trip. Field trip across.
Ass pussy.
This next song's called In Hindsight.
Play testicle shred.
Thank you.
Everybody's got to.
It's beer time for everybody. Come on,
Whatever. My A string mic came, dude.
Yeah.
It broke. It just.
It
happened in the last song. It was the very.
So, when did you start going to shows?
The first time I ever went to one of those shows, I think I was 15 or 16. So it would have been in like 2004, I guess. 2004 or 5.
That's cool.
Somewhere around in there. It was like, back then there was these shows of any kind, not just a hardcore show, but any sort of live music show that kids could go to. You know, pretty much just consistent of a show not in a bar by a cover band of any sort or anything like that. That was a new thing then. You know, so it attracted a lot of attention.
Oh yeah.
It really started a big craze at the time. People going to these shows, and it really, you started to see a lot of bands pop up in just a couple of years' time. A lot of hardcore bands. Because I mean, it's one of those things, you know, you get a couple of guys together that can at least half play an instrument, and you get together and you practice up, and you come up with a few songs. And I mean, back then they even covered a lot of songs, did like a hardcore version of a certain song, or just covered a song that was already a hardcore song.
Right.
So it was pretty cool, you know, and back then a lot of the people, for a while there, it got to where I think there was like a pretty stiff competition between the bands. Like they were really, you know, they were really dedicated to their bands. They really wanted to practice and get good because they had so many other bands to compete against. I wouldn't really say they had any sort of a vendetta against each other or anything, but they definitely were competitors amongst one another, even though they played the same shows and orchestrated a lot of stuff together because they had to. But back then, you know, people, they didn't have nearly as much to distract them, the kids in the band back then, as, you know, kids in these hardcore bands do now. And there was a lot more of them, you know. Like now in Crossville, I can only think of one hardcore band that's left, and that's Bare Your Teeth. There might be some other ones, but that's the only one I can think of that's left out of about 10 or 12 at one point in time.
All right. Do you remember who played at the first show you went to?
It was by Blood We're Bonded, I believe, was one of them, and I probably would have known the name of at least one other band if you hadn't have asked. I would have known. I can't remember. I'm fairly certain by Blood We're Bonded is one of them that were there. That were probably like the, you know, like unofficially the big shit there at that time.
Kind of like they still are.
Yeah, I guess. I mean.
Well, I mean, just the guys in that were in that band, kind of still together though.
Oh yeah. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that's who it was. I don't know though. It may not have been. It seems like the first time I ever went to one of those shows was before those guys were ever around. But I do remember that some of the first shows, like when I really started going regularly, which that didn't come about for probably at least another year after the first time I ever went to a show. You know, I went to one and I was like, oh yeah, this is pretty cool, but I couldn't drive at the time. I didn't have a car, but when I got to where I could drive myself and stuff, so I started going regularly, and that was definitely one of the bands that you saw at any show at any time around Crossville.
Right.
And of course back then there was the 1127, which was a venue just for these bands to go and set up and play shows, and just for kids to go in, you know, teenagers. I mean, every now and then you'd see people that were older, and of course people working there were adults, but pretty much everybody you saw that actually went to pay to get in and watch the show were a bunch of teenagers. And it's like I was talking about the last time we talked about it. Back then it was like a social thing. People didn't really go that much just to watch the bands to listen to the music. They didn't really care that much about the music. But then, you know, a lot of people like me didn't have a cell phone, or there was no Facebook or any of that crap. So, you know, you go in and you tell your mom, you're like, hey, there's going to be this, you know, concert at this place in town tonight, and, you know, it's especially friendly for kids and teenagers to get into, and it costs $2 to get in. They let you go. It's a perfect excuse to get out of the house for a few hours. You could go to one of these shows. You see everybody you knew, more or less, at one of those shows. And so, I mean, why wouldn't you go to one?
Exactly.
You know? And I mean, I'm not going to say that I didn't like the music or anything. I mean, there were some, of course, I didn't like, but I didn't go just because of the music. You know, for $2 to get out of the house for 5 or 6, 7 hours, or however long I'd be gone for before I had to be home. You know, I would pay $2 for that any old time I could get a chance to, really, and go see anybody that I cared about seeing from school. Probably a few people I didn't care about seeing, but that's beside the point. So back then, it really exploded there for a few years. You know, people lined up. You would go to these shows. It didn't matter if it was some band that nobody had ever heard of. I mean, even locally, like a new hardcore band on the scene in Crossville. It wouldn't matter. People would line up out the door to go watch them. It didn't matter if they were terrible. It didn't matter. It didn't matter. There would always be a good crowd there. And nowadays, I really think that whole scene has died. These days, kids are too busy with their, you know, 14-year-old baby mama shit and Facebook. You know, they don't get out and go to shows like that. They're too buried in technology and Justin Bieber and just the whole persona has changed about these shows these days. And I hear people talk all the time, oh, well, they suck, and then and sadly enough, it is true. There's a lot of these bands I've seen that are pretty terrible nowadays, and it's the same deal. The kids in the band are just like the kids that used to go to the shows. Nowadays, instead of getting out and going to a show, they're too busy caught up in something that nobody cares about or that they should care about. And you'll go to a show and they'll set up on stage, and it'll be the first time any of the members of the band have even seen each other in 2 weeks, let alone got together and practiced. So I think that the whole idea of it, you know, the whole idea behind these shows and these hardcore bands has completely changed over the last few years, because nowadays it's more like a social status to say you're in a hardcore band. But that still doesn't do a person any good, because no one hardly at all cares about hardcore bands like they used to. So you kind of get a double whammy in a negative way, because not nearly as many people go to these hardcore shows and watch them, and then, like, on top of that, the members in the band are just like, oh, well, I'm in a hardcore band, but that doesn't really say anything about their commitment. They pretty much, a lot of people join these bands just to say they're in it, and they really aren't committed, and they're not that good as a result.
Well, do you think some of these people who used to be in some of the hardcore bands back a few years ago and all that, who might have kids or something, if they kind of raise them into the idea to be part of it, as, you know, whether it's the original idea of it, of like being passionate or whatever, instead of a social status, if that could help bring it back? Or
yeah, I mean, I think it could if they were really, if that's another thing, if they were really committed to taking their kids to these shows and really introducing them to that lifestyle of going to these shows and supporting these local bands. Because for me, that was another thing. Whenever I was a teenager, you know, like I said, I never was really particularly that into the hardcore music itself, but I would support any one of those bands, you know, if I had friends in the band or something, just because, you know, they're a local band. They're small time. They're trying to make it somewhere. Back then they were. Nowadays they claim like they do, but they don't do any of the work that it takes anymore to get anywhere like they used to. Well, I wouldn't say all the hardcore bands are like that now, but I've definitely noticed several, like these new age bands now. There's a few that are still together, you know, that are people that are our age that started back then that are still together. I mean, obviously they've had to work pretty hard just to be together for that long. I mean, that's been like 10 years ago.
yeah.
And so I think that if a person was as committed to raising their kids into that scene as the bands used to be about playing their music and drawing a crowd, then yeah, I think it could be revived. But nowadays, it's kind of gotten to a point where it's kind of like watching reality television.
Yeah.
It's like watching MTV, as a matter of fact. Instead of there being music, there's, you know, kicking it with the Kardashians, and it's the same way with the music scene. Instead of you going and meeting up with all your friends at a venue and listening to some pretty good hardcore bands that have worked their ass off and practiced, you go and you meet up with some friends that, well, people that you call friends that really people talk shit about each other after they leave, and then it's the same deal with the bands. You know, it's pretty much just a gathering for people to go and kind of like catch up on the latest gossip at high school. You know, people, they get so buried in this petty stuff that the real passion and commitment to the music and to watching the music and listening to it is kind of just faded away, and now it's just a facade for something more petty and things that people should focus a lot less on.
Right.
Word. This song is called The End. Let's keep this shit moving.